He's working here like I'm like,
This is a 75 where I want my phone. Now, how long do you before your message?
No, we can do yours now too.
Yes, it's 75.
when they were pension, they still got money in it. Well, they have $12,000.
So that's right.
He divided and contributed to his pension. They were I got more on the neighbor over there. Up and down. 401k from them up.
For me? No, thank you.
One project is done.
Come wait a couple seconds.
She said, wait a couple seconds. Hey. Okay,
While we're
yes.
speaking. Yeah, we're ready. So, ladies and gentlemen, friends and family, we're going to have the service start. And we're going to have my good friend Dwayne is going to start us off, and then Jim's got a few words to say. And Dwayne, we're going to put you right up here on the live feed. I think we're up to 4 viewers, so.
Everybody come on in.
It's kind of like being on KPFT.
You guys can move in.
All right. Are we?
We're on.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody everywhere for coming together today. Rourke's a friend of mine through Seamus, Jim Moran. I've known him for 30 years or so at this point, and back in the day, the late 80s, early 90s, I actually did invade the McGaffin dinners a couple of times. They were always, big family, big food, good times. And I know this is a sad time. I just buried my mom yesterday. She turned 90 2 weeks ago, and in a really odd twist of fate, her funeral was yesterday, which happened to be my dad's 90th birthday. So it was similar to what maybe some of y'all are feeling right now. So I wanted to share something. It's about a mom, but it's about a parent. So it's something I shared at her funeral yesterday. I had to do her eulogy. And there's a Chilean-American author, her name's Isabel Allende, and she said this, "There is no death, daughter. People only die when we forget them. And if you can remember me, I will be with you always." Now, we're here to talk about Robert Paul McGaffin, Sr. He was born on the 7th of November in 1931, and he died on the 29th of May, just a week ago. That was 2 days. He left 2 days before my mom did. So 1931, Herbert Hoover was the president of the United States. We were in the Depression. Bela Lugosi was Dracula. The Star-Spangled Banner was officially adopted as the national song, and Nevada legalized gambling, which is important in this family, I've learned. And Prohibition was repealed. That's important too. And Rourke tells me that was in honor of his dad's birth. Bob was a Depression-era baby. He was born to Joseph McGaffin and Olive Duncan on the 7th of November during the Hoover administration up in Cortland in upstate New York. And while his father worked as a state trooper in New York, Bob enjoyed fun times with his older brother, Joseph Jr. That included sneaking peas off the back of a truck during deliveries to a grocery store, sneaking a chunk of ice off of an ice truck, because back then ice men came through the neighborhoods, and I'm old enough to remember an ice man coming through my neighborhood back in then Jersey. And then scrape, this is kind of a weird one, but scraping a bit of tar off of a tar man's barrel and chewing it like it was chewing gum, because remember, it was the Depression, and Xbox and the internet and none of these things had been invented yet, so chewing tar was big fun, good times. So after he graduated from high school, he did what all red-blooded Americans did. He joined the United States Army, May 15th, 1951. He served as a cook in the Army. He developed a lifelong passion for cooking. It served him very well, obviously, during raising of his 6 children, all of whom had voracious appetites except for the petite one, Rourke. The president was Harry Truman, and the first NBA All-Star game was played in the Boston Garden. And I really don't know who won particularly care that much. And that's about all that was going on in 1951. After he came home from the Korean War in 1953, Bob went to college. He graduated and he met this cute woman named Becky Russell in Utica, New York. And they fell in love. They got married on the 18th of April in 1958, and they just started building their own little army of McGaffins. Robert Jr., Russell, Roger, Rourke, Roxana, and Reed. And not only tolerated their kids, but they actually seemed to enjoy their company most of the time. Bob and Becky just celebrated their 60th anniversary this past April, and they spent it doing what they loved, playing slot machines at the Coshada Casino. So that goes back to gambling being legalized the year Bob was born out in Nevada. Bob's accounting degree led him to his first meaningful job out of the Army. He worked for Sears, Roebuck and Company. He was a collections specialist, and that led him to a 30-year career working for the Treasury Department, the United States Department of the Treasury, starting in 1963, officer in Oneonta, New York. And he spanned the JFK, Johnson, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, and Bush administrations. He did this work for a very long time and was promoted through lots of different levels of management. And he chose to relocate to Louisville, Kentucky in 1973. Right about the same time Evel Knievel was jumping 50 stacked cars out at the LA Coliseum, and Ken Norton was breaking Muhammad Ali's jaw, and Richard Nixon was still president. And back in those days, I'm told that Dad would take the boys every Sunday to cut down trees and chop wood so that there could be a continuous fire burning through the chilly days. And he even took his 6 obnoxious preteen kids in a station wagon. I don't know if it was a Ford Country Squire, but he took them in a station wagon to Disney World during Christmas break. And it was during that era that Robert Jr. one morning woke up with this miraculous power to fix everything and anything. And to this day, he and his faithful assistant Roger continue to turn out for every file that needs to be placed, every appliance that needs to be kicked, every bypass that needs to be in place to keep things working and keep things in compliance. In May of 1980, Bob accepted another promotion, and his relocation choices were reportedly Salt Lake City, Anchorage, Alaska, Hawaii, or Houston. Bob, Becky, and the kids arrived here in May of 1980. John Travolta was in town over at Gilley's back then promoting Urban Cowboy. It rained for 3 straight weeks until there was a sudden cow-killing, road-cracking drought that lasted the rest of the summer. And it was during this time that Russell joined the Marines. That was a time the U.S. wasn't officially fighting anybody except those MiGs on the Top Gun movie. So being a Marine was kind of an easy gig back then, I'm told. Roger also followed in Dad's footsteps and began working for the feds in the government pretty much from the day he got out of Klein Forest High School. And I'm supposed to say, go Eagles? Go Golden Eagles? Yeah.
Jim knows what I'm talking about.
All right. So, 1990, they launched the Hubble Space Telescope. I think they're trying to launch its replacement now, but somebody's not letting go of the cash. Bob and Becky recently retired. They sold their home in Houston. They moved back to upstate New York. They moved to a little town called Star Lake, and they owned a lake house in what's called the tiniest of little Adirondack towns. And it was in the tiniest cottage in this tiniest town. It's made from an old horse stable from back in the 1880s. And it had its charm, but the winters were harsh. They were isolated. They stayed there until 2000 when a tornado knocked down an enormous tree that chopped through their little lakeside cottage, and they moved to Clute, Texas, home of the Great Mosquito Festival. And they got here right when Elian Gonzalez was being returned to his Cuba, and they kept busy working at the local school. He worked as a crossing guard. They played bingo. He attended the VFW Lodge, where I'm told drinks are cheap and the beer is always cold. In 2005, the first YouTube video was uploaded. Bush Jr. was president. Katrina hit. Lance Armstrong won temporarily, I guess, his 7th Tour de France, because they took him all away. And Bob and Becky made their final home purchase. They moved back to Northwest Houston, and they stayed here. You know, they had started here 25 years before. Bob loved to work crossword puzzles. He loved to garden, and we all know he loved to cook. No one else was allowed to make the Thanksgiving turkey or the mashed potatoes, and his fresh baked bread was so good, make your knees buckle. He always baked extra for friends and neighbors. He had learned to cook while he was in the service in the Army and continued cooking for the McGaffin Army and their associated friends for the rest of his life. And another passion of Bob's was playing golf with his sons, grandsons, and friends, or watching golf, especially Tiger Woods on television. But his true passion spent with a happy, loving life, and to share some wonderful stories about times with him. So here's some memories that I had shared through Rourke about Bob from Roxanne. The things I can recall about my dad, also known as Pops Racer to me, is his patience with me and caring nature. I can recall many occasions of my father brushing my hair out in the evenings before bedtime to get all the tangles out without causing pain. I recall a time where, in an attempt to save my past my waist-long hair, after finding out I fell asleep with gum in my mouth, he worked peanut butter through my hair to save it from the mess out of my hair, and voila, the problem was solved. I think of times walking through stores with him, and he would see any baby and acknowledge them with a smile and something sweet to say to them to get a little baby giggle. How he loved kids. It amazed me to watch him, even with my own. I can recall my dad taking my Cammie, Kaya, and myself back in 2008 and helping me care for my daughters. He not only was a father to the 6 of us McGaffins, he stepped in as an extraordinary father figure inspiration for my daughters. He passed down so many skills to all of us over the years. To me, he has taught me how to become self-sufficient, attempting to fix things around the house. With Cammie, they share his skill with math and sweet, caring nature. With Kaya, her boldness and sarcastic nature. They cherish their papa. He was their hero. He is beloved and respected by so many kids and young adults over the years who experienced the McGaffin open arms, home, and family, that our McGaffin family continues. To know my dad is to love him. His sarcastic banter at any given moment was the best. Comments no one else could hear except the person sitting closest to him and desperately try not to laugh out loud from. His gift of sarcasm has been passed down to his children as well as to his grandchildren. The McGaffins have borne witness to the passing of their friends and extended family, but they seemed immune. Despite the trials and tribulations, they remained a family, healthy and intact and taking every opportunity to be together. Speaking as their friend, I hope the McGaffin gatherings stay as special and dear as they've always been, despite Bob's absence. You know, I heard that there was a debate amongst a couple of the brothers, and I don't know which two, about maybe what religion Bob was. That one of them said he's a Presbyterian, I think. Somebody's Protestant. And when I heard that, I kind of chuckled. I'm Catholic, and so anything that's not Catholic is Protestant. Presbyterian, Methodist, Baptist, whatever, you know, it's all, they're all Protestant, and it's all good. And not take this into a religious bent or anything, but you know, this is it's a spiritual time, and whatever anybody believes or does not believe, or whatever or however Bob believed or did not, I think there's some wisdom that I'd like to share, and it comes from the Gospel of St. Matthew, and it's kind of like words of wisdom that can apply to anybody for any reason for life, and it's commonly called the Beatitudes. And I just want to share them. It's only 8 of them. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the land. Blessed are they who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the clean of heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. And blessed are they who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And I started with something from Isabel Allende that I spoke at my mom's funeral yesterday. It was about the loss of a mother, and I'd like to share with you something from the American poet Robert Frost, who said, "You don't have to deserve your mother's love. You have to deserve your father's." And in conclusion, before we, I think, open the entire internet to anyone who's got something they'd like to share, I want to share a poem. My uncle is a professor up in Rochester, New York. He's retired now, but he taught English. And he used to make his students memorize poems. And I'm glad I wasn't one of his students. But he was one of my cool uncles. And he was going to recite this poem at my mom's service, but he got here late. And so he handed it to me to read at the funeral yesterday. And it's by the poet E.E. Cummings. And he was this interesting character who only wrote in small letters and didn't put titles on any of his poems, so the titles are sort of like the first words of the poem. But this is brief. It's not like an epic, like the Song of Hiawatha or something. So this is from E.E. Cummings, and this is something to share for you. I thank you, God, for most this amazing day, for the leaping greenly spirits of trees, and a true dream of sky, and which is natural, which is I who have died am alive again today. And this is the birthday of life and of love and wings, and of the gay, great, happening, illimitably earth. How should tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, breathing, any lifted from the know of all nothing, human, merely being, doubt unimaginable you? Now the ears of my ears awake, and now the eyes of my eyes are opened. I thank you for asking me to share this. I'm privileged and honored to share this with you. I share in your grief, and you all have my greatest condolences. And I'll turn it back to you, Roy.
Thanks so much, Dwayne. So our next speaker is Jim Stryker. He's got a few words to say. You're gonna be here in the hot box? Right there, sir.
Right
there's
there.
Bob. Yeah.
Well, hello. About a week ago, Roger asked me if I would maybe give him some insight into some good biblical passages that may be beneficial to discuss at today's event. And I suggested a couple of them to him, and then next thing I know, he asked me, well, would I be willing to speak about it? And I thought, what an honor to speak about Robert and share, my thoughts. Because when he first asked me, what excerpts out of the Bible would you like to talk about? I had quite a few of them that came to mind because I've gotten to know Robert, not so much personally with Robert, but through Roger and Robert Jr. So I got to kind of see into the family. And then sitting here today watching these pictures go by just reinforced what my thoughts were of the McGaffin family. And so when I first was asked, I thought, Robert definitely loved life. He liked to go golfing with his sons. He loved being with the kids. And so Robert had a strong love of his family. And one of the things that we look at in the military, we talk about, there are three pillars to our military families. Generally, we have great love for our country, great love for God, and great love for our families. And it appears that Robert definitely was going in that way. He had love of his country. He worked for the IRS for 27 years, served in Korea. He definitely loved his family. And I'm sure, based on from my experiences with Roger, he definitely loved God. And so Robert had those three pillars in his life. But also, I think the strongest pillar he had in his life was his beautiful wife, Rebecca, and his wonderful kids surrounding him. Robert loved to cook, apparently. He was a cook in the Army, and one of the things that he would do was cook for the family. And he definitely had a love for his family, and I often never had quite the courage to ask Roger this, but why did they stop with 6 kids? I wonder if they ran out of names that began with, and they didn't want to have any more kids at that point. But anyhow, definitely he was a family man who loved spending time with his family. Like I said, I've got to see into the family through Roger and Robert Jr. And, I'd have to say that Robert Sr. did a great job with the family. I mean, I'm so impressed by Roger. He's a good person, a good man. And Robert is a hard-working individual that I'm also impressed by. I wish I could just clone their minds and get Robert's mechanical ability and Robert's IT ability. It would make life so much easier for me. But I'm sure the rest of the family, which I didn't get to know, except for I did get to know work a little bit, but I'm sure the rest of the family is just like to get to know just outstanding individuals and a guaranteed plus to America. And I'm sure the reason that family came out that way is probably because of the guidance given to the kids by Rebecca and Robert. In fact, Robert was given advice to his grandson on his deathbed. David, are you still smoking? You should stop smoking. And he started kind of guiding David as to why he should stop smoking. I know you didn't come to hear that, so I'll stop now. But there he was on his deathbed thinking about his family and not wanting to let go until he gave the last bit of advice that he could. So many things came to my mind when I started thinking about those things and Robert Sr. And one of them that came to me right away was when John wrote, Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me will not hunger, and he who believes in me will never thirst. And so like the Heavenly Father is feeding his family, there was Robert not only feeding his daughter, but also I'm sure probably a lot of the neighborhood kids as well. So he was giving food and comfort to them. And I'm sure that as Robert lay there, God probably looked down upon him and said, Robert, job well done. Follow me and come to heaven at this time. And I, not being privy to it, but I kind of suspect what happened at that point is that Robert said, Father, I'm not quite ready yet. I can't quite let go of my earthly bounds because I'm tied to my family so strongly. I don't want to go, even though I know heaven is going to be much better and my pain will cease. I haven't quite transitioned yet to say goodbye to my family. So in Ecclesiastes, it's written, for everything there is a season and a time for every matter. Under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck what is planted. And I think Robert didn't quite want to say at that moment, I'll follow you now, Lord. I'm sure he said, Lord, give me a couple more days, as he fought to stay on earth with his family. So Robert did what was expected of him, and I'm sure his heavenly reward is now at hand. Another part of Ecclesiastes is a good man or a good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of life or the day of birth. And what they're saying there is that when you die, that day is better and more important than the day you were born, because that's the day that you go on to your heavenly reward based on what you did on earth. And I'm sure what Robert did, he is now in the comfort of it. And I'm sure he's still with his family in thoughts and in your hearts. And so I think where I would go next is where Robert is at this point in time. And I love this one, and this is when I first suggested to Roger. It says, I shall not want. He maketh me lie down in green pastures. Behind water forth my soul. He leadeth me into the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest me my head with oil, and my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So Robert has now that he experienced in the last week or so of his life, and is now in heaven, comforted with God. And another passage that I thought of is that, I'm not sure if you've ever read in the Bible, but there's a passage that goes something like, where God said, there are many rooms in my house in heaven. And there has to be, because when the McGaffins get there, they're going to take a lot of rooms. And so I suspect maybe Robert was called up and is using his carpentry skills now, adding on to God's house for his family, because I'll guarantee you, his thoughts and love were so strong with you as depicted in those pictures. So I found it was to be an honor just to speak about that and to talk about a great American family, the McGaffins. And so I was also told to mention that there is going to be food, but they're going to need about 15 minutes to get ready because Robert is not here. If Robert was here, the food would be ready. But unfortunately, Robert, as I said, is now in heaven with God. And so we're going to have to take about 15 minutes to get the food ready. And maybe I should also express my gratitude to have so many people here today in recognizing the great American family of McGaffins and Rebecca and Robert. So thank you for being here.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Sure.
All right, that is the last of the services. Is there anybody else speaking? All right, so thanks for tuning in.